The signal came in on a frequency we had no business monitoring. I was 3 weeks into a standard patrol loop through the outer Kashari Drift. Nothing glamorous, just the kind of route that keeps the charts current and gives junior officers something to log. My ship, Troll Corvette Unbroken Meridian, was running quiet. 4 crew on rotation, a cook who doubled as a field medic, and me. We were not a rescue vessel. We were not a warship in any serious deployment sense. We were, as my executive officer once put it, the galaxy's most politely armed survey team. The signal came in at 034 ship time, flagged by the passive array as a wideband burst, high compression ratio, non-standard encoding. The duty comms officer, a young woman named Previtt, woke me with a knock rather than an alarm. That was her judgment call. I respected it then, and I respect it now. An alarm would have set the wrong tone for what followed. She had already run the first decode by the time I reached the bridge. The signal was not in any active catalog. The encoding format matched pre-collective Vethara, a species we had historical records for, not living ones. The last verified Vethara transmission on file was 412 years old. Whatever had sent this burst, it had been traveling at light speed through the drift since before my civilization had left its own home system. I stood at the console and read the strip. Previtt had not touched anything beyond the initial decode. She understood, without being told, that this was a thing to read before a thing to act on. The content was short, navigation data, compressed, a grid reference, population count in the tens of thousands at time of transmission, a single word that every sentient species in the cataloged galaxy seems to arrive at independently in one form or another. Help, that was all. No faction designation, no coalition address, no diplomatic header, just the grid reference and the word. Whatever hierarchy the Vethara had used to formally route such things no longer existed to receive it. The empire the signal had been aimed at had collapsed 3 centuries ago, absorbed or scattered, its relay network long since gone dark. The message had been traveling through silence, patient as physics, until the passive array of a human patrol corvette caught it, in the drift. I did the math. The grid reference put the origin point, roughly 90 hours at standard cruise, off my assigned lane by a significant margin, not so far that I couldn't file it as an emergency deviation, not so close that anyone would believe I hadn't made a deliberate choice. I made the deliberate choice. Previtt asked, once, whether I wanted to relay the signal upward first and wait for authorization. I told her to log the deviation and come to the new heading. She logged it without further comment, and brought the unbroken meridian around. We spent 91 hours in transit. I read everything we had on the Vethara, which was not much. They had been a settled people. Agricultural, long-lived, architecturally conservative. They had built in stone and grown things in tiers. They had a concept in their recorded language that translated, imprecisely, as something between stewardship and stubbornness, a refusal to leave a thing unfinished. Their distress protocols had apparently included a wide-band lightspeed burst on the assumption that someone, somewhere, would eventually be in range to receive it. They had not been wrong. They had only been off by 400 years. Planet was not what the old charts described. It was smaller, visually. The vegetation had changed, spread in some places, and thinned in others, and there was a haze over the northern continent that wasn't in any pre-collective survey. But it was inhabited. Previtt picked up thermal signatures on the first orbital pass. Structures. Movement. A settlement of some kind in a valley on the southern landmass, built in tiers, in stone, the way the records said the Vethara had always built. I brought us into a low approach and opened a general broadcast on every frequency we carried. Kashari Standard, Coalition Common, and a handful of others. No response. Whatever communication infrastructure they had retained, it did not include anything we were using. I landed in a field at the edge of the settlement and told the crew to wait on the ship. I walked in alone. The structures were old and carefully maintained. The stonework was weathered but not crumbling. Someone had been pointing the mortar, placing the damaged courses, doing the patient, unglamorous work of keeping things standing. I counted perhaps 200 buildings on the main approach. There were people watching me from doorways and from the edges of the tiered garden, plots that rose up the hillside. They were the right shape for the archived records of Vethara physiognomy. Tall, narrow-shouldered, but the stillness in their posture that did not read as fear. It read as a people who had learned, over a very long time, to watch before they moved. A figure came forward from the crowd. An adult, older by the look of the bone structure, wearing work clothes and carrying nothing. She stopped about 10 meters from me and looked at me for a long time without speaking. I had prepared a greeting in what the ship's language file estimated was a functional reconstruction of Old Vithara. I said it. The pronunciation was almost certainly wrong, but she understood enough. I could see it in the way she was very still for a moment, and then was not still in a way that was controlled, she answered. The ship's translator, feeding through my ear, worked on it in pieces, she said. We sent that signal for before my grandmother's grandmother was born. I said yes, she said. It was for the collective. We sent it to the collective. You are not the collective, I said. No. The collective is not on this frequency anymore. We are. She looked at the unbroken meridian where it sat in the field, which is not a large ship, and which I could see, watching her face, she was trying to fit into some category she had prepared for. It did not fit neatly. I am not sure what she had expected, after 400 years of silence. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps something enormous. A single patrol corvette with 4 crew and a medic cook is a strange answer to anything, she said. You came because of the signal, I said. Yes, she said. It took this long. There was no accusation in it. That was not a judgment on us, or on the speed of light, or on the 4-century gap between the asking and the answer. It was just a fact that she was processing carefully, the way the Vithara in the old records had always processed things. Carefully and without waste. I told her what I had. 4 crew, a medic, a ship with basic supplies, and a functioning fabrication bay. I told her I had already sent the deviation report, which meant the location was now logged with the patrol network, which meant she should expect follow-up within a few months. Real follow-up, with proper tonnage. I told her that in the meantime, if she would show me what the settlement needed most, we would work on it. She was quiet for a moment, then she said, We did not ask Earth, I said. You asked someone. We were the ones in range. She looked at me for a while after that. Not with gratitude exactly. Something more like the look a person gives an equation that has resolved itself in an unexpected but technically valid way. A kind of formal acknowledgement that the answer, however strange, was still an answer. She turned and walked back toward the settlement, and she glanced back once, briefly, which I took as an invitation. I went back to the ship and told the crew to bring the medic's kit and fabrication manifest and whatever extra rations we could spare from the transit stock. Previtt asked if she should start on the follow-up signal, the one that would go to the network, and eventually bring someone with real capacity out this way. I told her to send it immediately and mark it priority 1. She asked what category to file it under. I thought about the strip from Eero 340, the 400-year-old grid reference, the tens of thousands alive at the time of sending, and the 200 buildings, and the woman with the steady eyes who had watched me the way her people had apparently always watched things. Carefully, without waste. Waits for an answer that might never come. I told Previtt to file it under distress received, response ongoing. She logged it that way. Then she picked up the medic's kit and followed me out of the ship and into the settlement. We were not who they had asked for. We were not the collective, not the empire, not any fleet they would have recognized from the old stories. We were a patrol corvette on a deviation from a supply lane, 4 crew and a cook, arriving 4 centuries after the asking. We stayed 6 weeks. That is what there is to say about it.